Hi, so yesterday we were obviously listening to the story of the explorers, and they were playing Stuck in the Mud, a game of taking the rain whilst to keep themselves occupied. So we're going to find out about Max, as that's our next chapter today. The screaming was not coming from inside Fred's head. He sat bolt upright and stared around the stone room. Dawn was beginning to break. Con was pushing her hair out of her eyes. Leela was already on her feet. Max was not lying on the stone floor. Max was missing. Fred ran out into the stone square, staring around at the grey light, praying that Max would jump out from behind a tree and stick his tongue out at them. "Max!" shouted Leela. "Maxie, where are you?" "Max!" roared Fred. The screaming stopped, and the silence battered itself against his skin harder than the noise. "Oh, not again," said Con, but there was no lightness in her voice. Then Fred's stomach turned suddenly cold, full of something writhing and maniacal. "Is that him?" He pointed at the sloping wall that they had tumbled down to the foot of the tree. There was a bundle lying at the base. Fred sprinted to the bank, but Leela outpaced him, legs working like fury. Max lay in a ball, and he was shaking, his spine convulsing against his shirt, and his breathing was rough and erratic. "Max," said Leela. "Max, are you hurt? Can you hear me? Say something." Max moaned and shook. His lips formed shapes, but he spoke no words. "What's wrong with him?" said Com. "I don't know." Leela gathered up his arms and legs and little body and stumbled forward. "I don't know. Come on." She tripped on a rock and nearly fell on top of him. Fred held out his arms. "Shall I carry him?" "No," she said as she held Max tighter. "Where's the explorer?" she said desperately. Her eyes raked the city. "He'll be working behind that vine curtain," said Fred. Leela shouted, turning and running as fast as she could. "Explorer, hey, where are you?" Backle was tangled in her hair, clutching at her neck with both arms. She didn't seem to realise the sloth was there. Fred ran after her, followed by Con, who slipped in the rain that glistened on the stones, scrambled up, her knee bleeding, and sprinted faster. Fred reached the vines ahead of Leela and began to push them away, fighting through the dense wall to where he'd seen the explorer disappear. "Help!" he called. "Are you here? It's an emergency." His voice sounded small and thin. The vines parted and the explorer stared out. His face was black with anger. "What did I say to you about this place?" "Oh, shut up!" Leela whipped to face him. Max cradled against her chest, her fingers crawling and clawing at his skin to hold him as he shook. "Max is sick. You help my brother or I'll kill you." The explorer's anger vanished. "What happened? Is he dead?" Leela let out a roar, a noise the like of which Fred had never heard. It had blood in it. Saliva flew from her mouth, and she backed away. "No, no, don't you dare come near him if you're going to say he's dead." She stood, the tallest 4'10" Fred had ever seen, the sloth still hanging on her shoulder like a bird on a pirate king. She blazed. "I apologise. I was startled," said the explorer. "He's not dead. Here, give him to me." Tears poured down Leela's cheeks as she lowered Max into the explorer's arms. "Get a branch from the fire. I need more light," he said. Fred ran to fetch a torch. Leela stood over them, unblinking. The explorer laid Max on the floor. He pulled off his shirt and made a pillow, and raised Max's head. He muttered, but didn't open his eyes. The shaking jerked in his legs, and he had saliva around his mouth. "Is he going to be all right?" asked Leela. "I feel like I've eaten a goblin," said Con. She retched and coughed. "What can we do?" "What's happening to him?" said Fred. "He's been bitten." "By what?" "Ants." "Ants? Oh, thank goodness, I thought it was a snake." Con let out a bark of laughter and relief, but the explorer shook his head. "Snake will be better. He must have stood on a bullet ant colony." "Bullet ants?" Leela let out a moan. "Aren't they—" She couldn't say the word. "Deadly. They can be particularly deadly if there are allergies involved. He needs to get to a hospital. They can treat him there, but only if he gets there soon." "How soon?" asked Leela. "He will shake for another day, and he'll develop a fever. The fever can't be allowed to last more than 5 days, a week at most. It will cause his brain to swell." So he's going to die?" "That's it," said Leela. You're going to let him die. You can't, I'll kill you. Her face and eyes were wild. No, of course not. The morning light showed the explorer's face was grey and suddenly ancient. I won't let him die. Not another. Fred thought of the explorer's face that night around the fire as he talked about love. How then? Urged Leela. Let me think, said the explorer. His tone was measured. No, there's no time to sit and think, said Leela wildly. You don't care, you don't understand, we have to do something now. I do care, in fact, and I do understand. He raised Max in his arms and began to rub his hands and feet, trying to quicken the circulation. I told you, I had a son. He stood and cradled Max against his chest. Come, this one will not die. But how will we get to the hospital? Said Fred. You said the walk would take a month, said Con. There's another way. What is it? Whatever is it? I'll do it, said Leela. Anything, anything. You fly, explained the explorer. Okay, we are going to go into the next chapter. So our next chapter is called Behind the Vines. So they're obviously going to go behind these mysterious vines that they've never been allowed to go behind before. The explorer passed Max to Leela, one hand under the boy's head. Stay with him. It will be quick. No, said Leela, whatever it is you're planning, I need to know. She rearranged Max in her arms, clumsily with love, cradling him to her. Come on. The explorer opened his mouth as if to argue, then met Leela's eyes and shut it again. He turned to the wall of green foliage. It goes further back than you think, he said. Come, push away the vines, quick. Fred shoved aside a great armful of lianas, some browned with age, some thick as his wrist. The vines looked too closely woven to have grown that way up. Up close it was clear that they had draped from something. They fell, uniform and an impenetrable curtain. Did this grow here, or did you plant it? Panted Fred as he pulled at the vines. It felt like trying to climb through a hedge. I planted it, plaited it, pruned it. It is worth having a secret place. The explorer pushed past Fred, pulling out his machete. He hacked through the foliage. Almost through. He widened the space and held back the vines for Leela. She shifted Max so that the boy's head rested on her shoulders, then stepped through. Fred heard her gasp. He pushed aside the final layer of tendrils and creepers and stopped short. The vines fell from the roof of a large three-sided stone room. It was built in similar stone to their sleeping room, but with its own ceiling almost intact. It was as high as a cathedral, and it smelt of moss and quiet growing things. The walls were covered in vines, and something had made a nest in the far corner, a ball of grass and feathers. And in the middle of the bare earth floor, something shone yellow and chrome in the green light. An aeroplane, breathed Fred. Precisely. Come, quickly, the explorer said as he strode across towards the plane. They edged forward, clumped together, Leela's arms tight around her brother. Here she is, the explorer thumped the side of the plane. It was small, with two seats set one behind another. But you said it had burned, said Fred. I did not, you assumed that. I said there was a fire, which is not the same thing. I was on a reef when she started to choke. We crash-landed through the canopy straight onto the stone city. Saved my life, actually. It took 5 years to repair her. Very slowly, Con put out a hand and stroked the wing of the plane. I've been keeping the boulevard between the trees clear of grass ever since I came, just in case. It will make a good runway. He stopped, corrected himself. It might make an adequate runway, I hope. We're going to fly home, said Con. Her eyes were shining. I am not. I can't fly no longer. He smacked his wounded leg. You need both feet to fly a plane. You will fly. You want us to fly a plane? Asked Fred. Well, not all three of you. One of you. No, said Con. Never. Not possible. Absolutely not. We've already been in one plane crash. Have you any idea what the odds are on surviving now? Well, what else are you planning to do? Con looked at Max. She looked at the plane. It's much simpler to fly than you think, said the explorer. Max gave a moan and struggled in Leela's arms. There is enough fuel for one brief lesson, and the journey to the hospital, which will fly you there. So, which of you will fly? Leela? As Max is your brother, you have first rights to do it. I can't, said Leela, her eyes full of tears. I would, but I can't breathe when I'm near heights. Con, said the explorer. Fred? Absolutely no way in the world, said Con. I don't want to kill us all. The explorer looked at Fred. Fred looked at the plane. His insides were growing hot and the hope of it and cold with the hope of it and cold with fear. His fingertips began to quiver. His ears were ringing. I can't, he said. Well, why not? Said the explorer. The thing that makes driving dangerous is the other drivers. There will be no other planes. On one lesson, you will have to learn fast. But what if I crash? Fred asked. You will have to refrain from doing so, said the explorer. But you have not, I noticed, said you won't. You have said that only you can't. I say you can. Fred, said Leela. Her eyes met his. Fred had never seen a person look at once so frightened and yet so brave. All right, said Fred. I'll try. Of course you will, said the explorer. Leela and I will make Max comfortable. I'll return in an hour, and I expect you to be waiting here. The explorer held out his arms to take Max, but Leela clutched him closer to his chest. I'm coming with you, said Com. I could be useful. I care for my great aunt all the time when she's sick. Don't waste time, said the explorer to Fred. Climb into the front seat and get a feel of the controls, but don't press the black button. That's the starter. Do not recommend you try to fly through stone. And they turned, leaving Fred alone in the great stone cathedral with the waiting aeroplane. Okay, we're going to leave it there for today. So obviously they've found the plane, and our next chapter is called The Green Sky.